Have you ever met someone who could shake an entire city? Not with money, not with power, but with nothing more than a simple question? That man was Socrates. 2,500 years ago, in the bustling heart of Athens, while soldiers fought wars and politicians gave speeches, Socrates walked the streets with a quiet smile, stopping strangers, friends, and even leaders, and asking them questions so sharp they cut through every illusion they held about truth, justice, and life. He owned nothing. He wrote nothing. And yet, his words carried only through questions, were powerful enough to change philosophy forever and dangerous enough to get him sentenced to death. But here's the real reason his story matters to us today. We live in an age of endless answers. Google, AI, social media. The world throws information at us every second, but very few of us have the courage to stop, to doubt, and to ask the kind of questions that truly matter. In this video, we will uncover the timeless wisdom of Socrates and discover 3 life-changing lessons from the man who proved that questioning everything is the beginning of true wisdom. So, who exactly was Socrates? He wasn't a king. He wasn't a general. He wasn't even a writer. In fact, Socrates never wrote a single word. Everything we know about him comes from the students who followed him. Most famously, Plato. Socrates was born in Athens around 469 BC, a city alive with art, democracy, and debate. And yet, instead of chasing wealth or fame, he chose a very different path. He wandered the markets, barefoot, dressed in the simplest clothes. He stopped citizens in the streets, rich and poor, young and old, and he asked them questions no one dared to ask. Questions that stripped away their certainties and forced them to face the truth. This way of dialogue became known as the Socratic method, a relentless search for wisdom through questioning. But not everyone admired him. To the powerful, he was a threat. To the comfortable, he was a mirror they didn't want to look into. And in the end, Athens put him on trial, accusing him of corrupting the youth and of disrespecting the gods. Socrates could have begged for mercy. He could have chosen exile. Instead, he accepted the hemlock, drinking poison with calm dignity, because living without truth, to him, was worse than death itself. Now, let's leave ancient Athens for a moment and look at the world we live in today. We are surrounded by answers. Instant, endless answers. Type a question into Google, and in less than a second, millions of results appear. Scroll through social media, and you'll find opinions on everything, from politics to health to how you should live your life. At first glance, it feels like progress. We know more than any generation before us. We carry the entire library of human knowledge in the palm of our hand. And yet, with all this information, we are not necessarily wiser. We confuse noise with truth. We mistake popularity for wisdom. And we often let algorithms decide what we should think, what we should buy, what we should believe. Instead of asking hard questions, we accept easy answers. Instead of thinking deeply, we scroll endlessly. Doesn't that sound familiar? In a way, it's not so different from ancient Athens, where people shouted in the marketplace, argued in assemblies, and followed the crowd without ever questioning themselves. That's why the voice of Socrates is still urgent today. Because in a world overflowing with answers, the rarest and most powerful thing we can do is to ask the right questions. The first lesson from Socrates is this: doubt yourself before you doubt the world. He once said, "I know that I know nothing." At first, it sounds like a paradox, but hidden inside is the deepest wisdom. Think about it. Most people walk through life certain of their opinions. They argue with confidence. They post with authority. They cling to beliefs as if holding on to a lifeline. But certainty can be a prison. It locks us inside our own assumptions and blinds us from seeing the bigger truth. Socrates showed us another way. Instead of saying, "I am right," he asked, "Could I be wrong?" Instead of declaring answers, he invited questions. That kind of humility is not weakness. It is the beginning of wisdom. In today's world, this lesson is more powerful than ever. Imagine a leader who admits, "I might not have all the answers." Would you trust them more or less? Imagine a student who says, "I don't know yet, but I want to learn." Isn't that the kind of person who grows the fastest? Even in our personal lives, relationships, work, dreams, the courage to doubt ourselves opens the door to listening, to learning, and to transformation. Because when we admit we don't know everything, we finally make room to discover something new. Socrates teaches us that the wisest people are not those who collect answers, but those who never stop questioning themselves. The second lesson from Socrates is this: ask questions instead of giving answers. Unlike other teachers of his time, Socrates never stood on a stage to lecture. He didn't hand out wisdom like coins. Instead, he sat down with people in the marketplace, in the gymnasiums, in the streets, and he asked, and asked, and asked again. His questions cut deeper than any speech could. What is justice? What is courage? What is a good life? He didn't provide ready-made answers. He led people into their own contradictions until they could see the truth for themselves. This became known as the Socratic method, teaching not by telling, but by guiding others to discover their own wisdom. Now imagine how powerful this is today. Think of a parent. Instead of saying, do this, don't do that, what if they asked, why do you think this matters? Suddenly, the child begins to think for themselves. Think of a leader. Instead of barking orders, what if they asked their team, what do you see that I don't? A single question can unlock creativity, trust, and ownership. And think of you. In every conversation, you have a choice: to impress others with what you know, or to inspire them with what you ask. Socrates reminds us, answers may satisfy for a moment, but questions have the power to last forever. The third lesson from Socrates is perhaps the hardest of all: live by the truth, even if it costs you everything. When Athens put Socrates on trial, he had options. He could have begged for mercy. He could have promised to change his ways. He could have chosen exile and lived out his days quietly in another city. But he didn't. Instead, he stood before the jury and spoke calmly. I will not give up philosophy. I will not stop seeking truth. For the unexamined life is not worth living. Those words sealed his fate. And yet, he never wavered. He drank the cup of poisoned hemlock with dignity, with serenity, with a quiet strength that echoed louder than any defense he could have made. Socrates showed the world that integrity, the courage to live in alignment with your deepest values, is more precious than comfort, more enduring than popularity, more powerful than fear. And this lesson is timeless. In our world today, it is so tempting to stay silent, to go along with the crowd, to trade authenticity for acceptance. But every time we betray our truth, we shrink a little inside. And every time we stand for it, no matter the cost, we grow. Socrates reminds us, wisdom is not just in what we think, but in how we live. To live honestly, to live courageously, to live in truth, even if the world turns against us. That is the legacy of Socrates. So, what can we take from the life of Socrates? 3 timeless lessons. First, the humility to doubt ourselves. Second, the courage to ask questions instead of forcing answers. And third, the strength to live by truth, even when it costs us everything. These are not just ideas from ancient Athens. They are guides for us, right here, right now. In a noisy world of opinions and headlines, Socrates calls us back to silence, to reflection, to the power of a single honest question. He reminds us that wisdom is not about collecting information, but about living with integrity. Not about sounding smart, but about seeking truth. And maybe, just maybe, the most revolutionary thing we can do today is to stop pretending we know everything and begin asking, with open hearts and open minds, what is the good life? What is justice? What is truth? Because the world doesn't change when we give the right answers. It changes when we dare to ask the right questions. If this journey with Socrates inspired you, subscribe to Modern Mind, Ancient Wisdom. Together, we'll keep exploring the voices of the past to discover the wisdom we need for the present.